You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. Joining me in studio, we have back with us Iris Stevens. Iris, how are you?
I'm just doing great. Thanks.
It's always great to have you on.
Well, it's always great to be here.
So Iris is the coordinator, the head of the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party. So how's that going?
That's going really well. We communicate with all of the Tea Parties across the state, some of them across the country. And we found out we have really, really good meetings, and there are a lot of people jealous of how many people that we have showing up. And so we've got
it's dwindling other places,
it's dwindling. And I think, it takes a lot. It takes us a lot of hours to put together programs and stuff to interest people and whatnot, but it's been worth it.
That's good. That's good. So let's start with something I know you guys are organized against. We've covered sales tax elections across the state. Now we're kind of focused on what Jonesboro is trying to do, raise the sales tax by 1%. What are your thoughts on this?
When we were approached first, Debbie Pelley and I were, about this issue, I said, I didn't close my mind to it because, Jonesboro has needs, and that's unfortunately how we have to run government. But then the more information came out, the more I was just appalled at what they were trying to do, not necessarily the individual projects. And the Tea Party has always been strongly for the police and the fire. So I was happy to see that until I saw the limitations they were putting on the tax that would actually not have as much impact on the police and fire department as most of us think it should. There are a lot of people who think they should be getting the full 1%, but that's neither here nor there. It's just that when we looked at the programs, when we looked at how this was being run, it's essentially they're ramrodding it through over a period of summer when most people are, take their vacations, they're out doing things, they're not paying attention. Then the final vote will be September 10th. You've just gotten the kids back in school. You're doing ball games. You're doing, running here and there. You're getting, organized for the fall. And then we have the special election vote, which, the problems of special election vote.
I want to get into that here in a minute. But do it just before we get into the numbers. Just that. Is that an act of deception?
Oh, I think it's very deceptive. That's why we got involved. When I found out the whole story, initially I was just kind of, we need some, and these are not bad projects and what. Then I found out the whole story, and it made me really angry. You don't deceive people. If people knowingly go to the polls, and I'm talking about a lot more than 17% that normally show up in a special election. If people knowingly go to the polls, they have all of the information, and they want to vote in a 1% sales tax.
Go for it.
Hey, that's what democracy and republic is about. Exactly.
I agree.
And I have no problem with that. But it's the amount of deception we normally get, especially through special elections, that bothers me.
Yeah, like you said, doing it in the summer, and then nobody knows, they're out living their lives. And then you got, not to mention on top of the summer, then you have the average worker who thinks, well, I go to vote during a primary and a general election, like that's when I go, or every 2 years, not in the middle of September.
Exactly.
And the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, and I know you have this article, but I pulled this up, low voter turnout and high pass rates. So they did a study from 1981 to 2016, and they found that when voter turnout, when a sales tax election is held in a general election, there's an average over from 1981 to 2016 of 44%. And so when 44% average turnout, the pass rate is 45%. So the tax increase only passes 45% of the time. If it's held in a primary, your voter turnout decreases to 26%, but it still has a 56% chance of passing. So better than 50%, better than a coin toss. But if you have, in a special election, you have 19% voter turnout on average from 1981 to 2016 and a 77% pass rate.
It's the exact reason they have special elections. A lot of people don't realize this. This is not an emergency. For Jonesboro to do this is not an emergency. And most people do not realize that the reason they do special elections is because the people who support it, they know all about it. They're usually in on the very beginnings of it.
Yeah.
They go out and vote for it, but the vast majority of other people don't. And that's why it has this pass rate. So that's the reason that we have special elections in this state.
Yeah,
and it has really caused a lot of problems. I know you've got that information too about how it's gradually since 1981 on has raised our tax rates, especially in these localities, until, let's say, I believe We are third, and this is part of that same report, which is excellent. Arkansas has the third highest combined state and local tax rate, third highest in the country. Tennessee has the highest. It's 9.46. If Jonesboro raises this 1%, our tax rate, sales tax, will go from 8.50 to 9.50, which would then be higher than Tennessee's, the highest in the country. Now, keep in mind, this is average. There are cities localities that have higher, but this is the average. So Jonesboro would actually have the highest tax rate, of any place around, except for, these other cities who've raised it.
Right, and Tennessee has no income tax.
No income tax, exactly.
You can justify that in a way. It's a consumption tax. But, you have Jonesboro, for example, that, we got a statewide audience. I don't know if people know this, but Jonesboro likes to think of itself as a competitor to Fayetteville. I think the universities have something to do with that.
Absolutely.
And so you have people around here that look across the state and they see, well, Fayetteville's sales tax rate is this. So why can't ours be? Well, look at the difference in your, Democrats that represent Fayetteville in the state house versus the Republicans that represent Jonesboro.
Exactly. And they have a little bit of difference too. I knew back when KAIT ran a 2-part special on Fayetteville. Those of us in the Tea Party, I went, whoops, something's going down. And it wasn't a week and a half. And we got the information about the sales tax.
Hang on a second. You're telling me that the local ABC affiliate KAIT here, they want.
I don't know if they were complicit or somebody just came to them and said, let's do a comparison of Fayetteville and Jonesboro, because they're close in size, even though Fayetteville is significantly, bigger. And they continue to say, Arkansas is like 89 square miles. Well, keep in mind, they annexed everything. This is hyperbole. They annexed everything from Paragould to Wallenburg, and that's why, we have problems in that area. But I just knew when KIT was running this, there was an ulterior motive, and sure enough, it came up about a week and a half later.
That's
Keep in mind, they want us to do a sales tax, but look at Fayetteville. They have 3 major corporations. They've got the Hunt, the Tysons, and Walmart. And, talk about bike trails, which, of course, everybody's going to use.
Oh,
of course,
yeah.
Across the country, nobody uses them, but everybody's going to use bike trails. So, really, we're subsidizing some people's hobbies when you want to put in all these hundreds of millions of dollars worth of bike trails. But listen to this. Walmart's foundation provided, in Fayetteville in the area, provided $74 million for the construction of bike trails over the last 10 years. That's $10 million, $7 million a year.
Good for them. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, fantastic.
But where's our corporate sponsorship?
Yeah.
Not one person in this whole sales tax stuff has mentioned the concept, let's do some corporate sponsorship. Now, I don't want to, hit up Wallace Fowler or anything, but we've got a lot of money in this area. Why are we not asking these people, would you subsidize, would you contribute to bike trails, would you contribute to this or whatever? Instead, it's just, let's come to the taxpayer and take it out of your pocket.
Yeah, I guess the money up here is just not as progressive as the money over there. We need bike trails and bike lanes and everything else. And, I get it. This is what's fascinating to me. I mean, if... I know there's bikers here, and, they're passionate, but you're right. It is kind of a taxpayer subsidy of a hobby that very few people use, and that's fine. I mean, that just is what it is. I mean, we could pick anybody's hobby, I mean, why
but
not
notice they're not subsidizing my hobby. They're not supplementing my daughter's hobby.
Exactly.
We have to look at things like that. And when somebody comes and tells me, well, I really like bicycle trails, and they're just wonderful and everything, you think, well, why don't you register your bicycles, those $5,000 bicycles, for $50 a year?
Yeah.
And all of those who are really seriously interested in bicycling.
Then you're fun. Then you're
helping fun. At least you've got skin in the game.
My hobby is pit barbecue. So do I want every park around here to have a hand welded smoker so I can support my hobby? No,
exactly.
No.
But that's essentially what we're doing. And I know you've got the total number of projects they want to do, I think, is way overblown. And there's another area that involves that. Listen to what they're doing. This is according to the ordinance itself. This money would be used to fund the acquisition, construction, repair, equipping, and improving of capital improvements of a public nature for the arts, aquatics, beautification, libraries, museums, park facilities, recreational facilities, sidewalks, and trail systems. Is there anything left that I haven't mentioned?
I don't think so.
See, that's the problem. This amount of money, and then you consider 12 years down the road when this tax is supposed to sunset, these projects will still require staffing and maintenance.
What about a toll for the bike trails?
Oh, that's possible.
You know,
what about both?
Yeah.
You know, we're talking millions of dollars. People don't understand that.
Paying
I
a
think
toll.
we're already talking about $140 million. I'd have to look at my facts and figures.
Yeah.
And, for the bike trails up till now.
Let's stop here. We're talking with Ira Stevens. She's the coordinator for the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party. We're going to take a short break, reset here. I want to talk about the Craighead County Republican Committee, something Iris and I both witnessed when we were in that meeting a couple weeks ago. Don't go anywhere. This is Conduit News. Back in a moment. We're back here with Ira Stevens, the coordinator for the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party. We just talked about the 1% proposed sales tax in Jonesboro, and I think Iris, we did a pretty good job,
of exposing some of the problems.
Yeah, some of the issues that we have with it reasonable, and I'd like to have you back on and talk even more about that in the future. Yeah. But I'd like to kind of move on. We were both, you and I, at the Craighead County Republican Committee a couple of weeks ago. I think that was back on the 27th or 28th, and it was interesting. First of all, it was good to see you there. There was a resolution that was proposed that did pass, affirming the Republican Party platform and encouraging all politicians who are members of that committee to, vote for things like the power of faith in God, lower taxes, to produce economic growth or freedom, the right to keep and bear arms. And it had trouble passing. It passed with 2/3 vote, but for example, Senator John Cooper, who I know is facing a primary opponent next year, Dan Sullivan, State Representative Sullivan, he spoke against the resolution and said that it was unconstitutional or something.
He had some of the most amazing comments in his speech. First of all, it was essentially a cobbling together of comments from documents, historical documents and things. But when he claimed that it really is unconstitutional, because we would be expecting representatives and senators to take an oath, a loyalty oath, which is ridiculous. It's simply a resolution that, please, legislators, support our principles, support the Republican principles. And he did about a 10-minute speech where he said, essentially aligned this kind of action to being subversive. And he says the first president cautioned against the dangers of political parties, and went on from there as if the very fact that we were political parties, and
he's a member of it.
And it's just at the Republican committee
meeting. It was very strange.
It was very...
One of the strangest moments of this year for me was when I was listening to that.
Well, it was very odd afterwards, during part of it, because I was sitting there listening to it, and I know other people may not have been, but I was just, nothing else to do, and so I was listening to it. I know that's bad.
Other people might not have been listening to it.
But anyway, what he said, and I've just got to quote this, because he said, we know best, the balance of scales, all that. He said, in our free country, we're different from third world countries with political entities regularly intervene when the people and those who make the laws guide by dictate what the people have to live by. He said, that was indeed the system devised for governing the old Soviet empire. The hero of the political entity that instructed the lawmakers to do what they wanted, that is exactly the same system that this resolution seeks to institute. And I thought, well, now that's interesting. I've been called a lot of things in my time, but I have never been called a communist. And essentially that analogizes, asking people to support a resolution to being a communist entity.
Yeah.
And first of all, you have the apparent dislike for parties, and now you have that a resolution, just a voting for a resolution.
Saying this is what we believe, this is what we need
taxes,
to vote.
Less government intervention, and that makes you a communist because
it was odd.
It was really strange.
It was very strange, odd to oppose something like that. Now, let me ask you this, Iris. You supported Senator Cooper, several years ago when he ran during
the whole
special
Tea Party
election.
did. Yes, we walked streets. We gave money. We made phone calls. In other words, we were fully in to get him elected. We felt like he was a conservative candidate, that he would vote against some of the things that were going on in Little Rock at that time. And unfortunately, he wasn't down there too long when he really, just blank. He's just disappointed us.
Yeah.
He supported especially the Obamacare. Well, it wasn't Arkansas Works at that time, but it was the Medicaid expansion.
Yeah. Coincidentally enough, just so we're talking about this. He killed Senator Linda Collins' bill.
Yes.
That would have ended it.
Yes.
And he was the deciding vote after he ran a whole campaign. She brought forth the bill. It was a good bill to end the program, and he killed it. And it would, see, the thing is, if it would have gotten to the floor at that time, I think it would have passed. The Senate floor at that time, I think, would have voted to kill it.
And that was unfortunate because, we all know, and working for Conduit, how much that has cost Arkansas and how much it's going to cost Arkansas in the future.
Yeah.
About, with...
It was a costly vote.
Yeah, and the thing about it is right now we're spending money that is not going anywhere because we're paying for people who are not even on the system. We're paying for people who live elsewhere.
Yeah.
But he also makes another analogy with this is that if you don't support what I want you to support, the Obamacare Arkansas Works, listen to what he says. He said the public will never stand for Republicans voting out to cut off funds to the terminally ill and hospice, stopping funding for the elderly in nursing homes, preventing children from getting necessary surgery, eliminating infirmary care of infants, and many other such services. So if we don't support this version of Obamacare, Medicaid expansion, Arkansas Works in Arkansas, we're guilty of wanting this.
Yeah.
And that's faulty premise.
Now, can you read that again? So when did he say this? Do you know?
This was in March of 2018. This was a letter to the editor.
I remember this.
And
I remember thinking, it was like, well, the program doesn't even have to do with those types of people.
No. The expansion basically deals with people who are healthy, or, adult, not married, no kids.
Yeah.
Who don't even have to work, didn't have to contribute. At one point, didn't have to contribute anything.
Okay.
We tried to do that, and now the federal government may shut that down.
Yeah.
But I'll read that again. He said, Republicans will be voting to cut off funds to the terminally ill and hospice, stopping funding for the elderly in nursing homes, preventing children from getting necessary surgery, eliminating infirmary care of infants, and many other such services. Now, that's the equivalent of the Democrats saying we're going to throw Granny off the cliff.
That's exactly right.
But this is a Republican, supposedly, and somebody who ought to know better that that's not at all what our Kansans Republicans want to do. What we want is a more efficient service, one that says, okay, this is for the people who need it, not just for anybody who wanders in the state, and that we pay $500 a month for, whether they use the service or not. And that's also information.
And, that brings up kudos to State Representative Josh Miller, who finally got a bill passed to take care of the developmentally disabled. So that's good. Which is an attempt to take, because we had a huge blind spot there for a while. We're spending all this money able to work adults, and we have people that can't get their medicine and taken care of. So at least that we've made grounds to try to correct that. But he's been disappointment as well. I mean, he basically Senator Cooper. He was in this studio with me many times.
Right.
This is back in 2000. I guess 14, right, or 2013,
something like that.
But 13 and 14. And was just adamant about his conservative principles, and it seemed like that went out the window almost immediately.
They did. Usually, you can rely on a legislator being down there a couple of years, before they go. And he did almost immediately. He did an about face.
Yeah.
And of course, that makes you wonder. Well, what kind of principles? Because principles are the most important thing that a legislator has.
Yeah.
I can handle a principled liberal better than I can handle a non-principled conservative, somebody who just votes for whoever either pays them, and I'm not implying that.
Yeah.
But whoever has the most influence over them.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
Ira Stevens, thank you so much for coming on. I'd love to do it again sometime.
Oh, please.
And on John Cooper, Moms Demand Action. Moms Demand Action had an event in Jonesboro, I think, over the weekend. The city had an event, Moms Demand. And Senator Cooper was with the anti-gunner Mom Demands Action, and he also voted against that Stand Your Ground bill. It was the deciding vote on that in this last session. Very, very interesting. Well, it'll be an interesting primary. Clearly two choices.